Okay, but what we're going to do now is we're going to read The Mind of the Hungry Agent, Hunger, Affect, and Appetite by Michel David Ombrato and Edgar Phillips. Introduction. The primary biological function of hunger is to motivate us to seek food and eat. Uh, a tempting first pass at a philosophical account of hunger might then be to say that being hungry is simply a matter of being disposed to engage in food seeking and consuming behavior. This suggestion, however, succumbs to the slightest scrutiny. Even though being hungry clearly does involve being disposed to eat, it seems that we may be so disposed without being hungry. We may want to eat, for instance, in order to gain weight, or because of the food before us is especially appealing, or out of boredom. What is it then that is distinctive about being hungry, about being motivated by hunger to eat? A natural thought is that hunger feels a certain way that the other states of being motivated to eat do not, and that hunger motivates us to eat in virtue of its feeling that way. If this thought is correct, accounting for how hunger motivates requires accounting for its experiential dimension and the connection between the hungry agent's experience and her food seeking and consuming behavior. Some common sense observations might seem to support a fairly simple account of how hunger motivates. First, the hungry person typically experiences a kind of discomfort. Hunger involves distinctive unpleasant sensations. Indeed, in cases of extreme deprivation, hunger is viewed as a form of abject suffering. Second, the discomfort is normally alleviated by means of eating. Hence, the simple account. We don't like experiencing discomfort, so when we feel hungry, we want to eat. Further observations, however, cast doubt on this account. For one thing, the experience associated with being hungry is not always negative. For instance, we are typically pleased to be hungry if we have a good meal to look forward to. In such cases, feeling hungry is often inextricably intertwined with a host of positive affective phenomena. Feelings connected to the anticipation of satisfaction, as well as emotional reactions such as interest in and excitement about food. Yeah, I will definitely say that, like, I will, if I'm looking forward to a good meal later, I will not eat now because I don't want to spoil my meal. And that's definitely a thing. So, like, this is a good point. And, like, yeah, anyone chime in because I'm like really happy with this papers. I feel like this is the sort of thing like everyone can talk about. You don't need to know like arcane metaphysics to discuss this. It's not like one of these terrible grounding papers I like to read. Although I bet we could do a grounding of food or a grounding of hunger, and everyone would be very sad, except for me. Relatedly, it seems that actually I'd be sad too. Relatedly, it seems that even if we can conceptually distinguish hunger from what we call appetite, that is, the felt desire to eat for eating's sake, the two ordinarily come together. We look forward to eating not merely as a way to alleviate the unpleasant sensations associated to hunger, but as something inherently enjoyable. The presence of this desire in the mind of the hungry agent seems more than mere coincidence. Finally, and more fundamentally, even if we restrict our focus to the negative aspects of the experience associated to being hungry, the connection between the hunger's negative hedonic character and its character as a motivation need clarification. Should we think of hunger as discomfort in order to alleviate which we are motivated to eat, or might we instead construe such discomfort as already implicating something motivational, so that to understand being hungry as a way of being discomforted is to understand it as a way of being motivated? In this paper, we show how developing this latter suggestion can provide an account of how hunger motivates that is free from the problems of the simple account. We will argue that the experiential dimension of hunger is best viewed as an affective in nature, more specifically, that it involves a dynamic, complex interplay of negative and positive hedonic feelings. Such hedonic feelings motivate in virtue of their inherently punishing and rewarding phenomenology, which crucially involves specific changes in the way the hungry agent's attention is deployed. Our discussion will proceed as follows. First, in section 2, we consider a seemingly straightforward strategy for accounting for hunger's motivational role. On this approach, there is nothing distinctive about the hungry agent's motivation to seek food. It is simply an instance of ordinary rational motivation, and thus does not itself need to be characterized in reference to the distinctive phenomenal characteristic of feeling hungry. What distinguishes the motivation associated with hunger is just that in this case our reason for eating is that it will rid us of hunger's unpleasant sensations. We argue that this model makes the relationship between feeling hunger and eating implausibly instrumental and fails to capture the urgency characteristic of the phenomenon. Okay, this makes sense. Like, basically, I think what they're saying right here is, look, you get hungry, that's fine, but like, it's not telling you why you get like crazy about eating sometimes. Like, you need to eat. So the fact that it's unpleasant is one thing, but like, you'd be like, I need to eat sometimes, or like, I need to have a cookie. This is not giving you the specific enough understanding of what hunger is doing. Like, yes, you need to eat and then you go eating hungry, but like, you need to do a lot of stuff and you go do it, but it's not the same thing as like, I need that cookie right now. Okay. These aspects of hunger, we argue in section 3, suggest that feeling hungry involves a felt need or urge to eat that is inherently motivating. This raises a question about the connection between the urge and the kinds of somatosensory aspects of feeling hungry to which the previously considered account appealed. The standard approach to hunger and other drive-based affective reactions, for example thirst, fatigue, and other physical cravings, is to characterize this connection at the subpersonal level. There are neurological mechanisms that connect negatively valenced representations of given deficiencies, such as, for example, representations of undernourishment with urges or impulses. To be hungry is thus to be subject to a certain specific sensations and urges or impulses that happen to be neurologically coupled. This sort of account is, we suggest, incomplete in that it says nothing about either the phenomenology of the urge to eat nor about how this urge is connected with the unpleasant sensations of hunger at the personal experiential level. In section 4, we articulate that connection by appealing to attention as mediating between two components, developing our account by analogy with the similar role that attention plays in reflexive pain reactions. Okay, so that's interesting. So like, maybe if like something happens and your arm hurts, you look at your arm all of a sudden. So it's like, my hand hurts, I look at my hand. It's like something like that. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about that though, because if you got reflexive pain reactions, you already have an understanding of your body. You don't have an understanding of the food in the world inherently. Or maybe you do learn both. But like, the idea that like, I'm hungry and I'm going to go seek out food. Like, I'm hungry and I want to drink my beer. So I want to drink my beer, and let's say this is giving me energy because beer has calories in it, which it does, and I'm hungry, so this is like a easy way for me to get calories. That takes a lot of knowledge and stuff to be like, I need the beer for the calories, not for the alcohol in this case. So the question is, if you need the beer for the calories, that's very different than a reaction where, like, say, like a bug bites you and you slap your hand to like get the mosquito. That feels like that's much more inherent reactive, like a reflexive thing before that they're saying here, like in pain, versus I need the cookie or the beer, because a cookie or a beer is not like slapping at a mosquito. Because like the mosquito, it doesn't matter. You're slapping at yourself. You're slapping at something that's a pain that's already within you. The beer is outside of me. I'm not slapping at my hunger. Like, I'm slapping at a mosquito. Okay. We'll see how they go though. This account satisfies the main aim of the paper. It explains how hunger motivates us through its phenomenology to eat. Nonetheless, as we suggest in section 5, the appeal to a felt need or urge is not enough to capture the complexity of the way we are ordinarily motivated when hungry. In order to do that, we need to consider hunger's relation to further affective reactions, more specifically ones with a positive attracting rather than aversive character. In particular, we argue that hunger facilitates the elicitation of appetite, a felt desire for food or attraction to the prospect of eating, such phenomenon is recruited by hunger to further its motivational role, so that ordinarily we are at once driven by hunger and drawn by appetite. This dual character of the hungry agent's motivation to eat, as we show in section 6, can go a long way to explaining the variable hedonic features of hunger and eating. All right, so this is just kind of like they've got a ton of things going on. We've got like multiple hedonic features. We've got like drives of hunger and appetite. This is just exactly. It's donut time. Thank you, Vipers, for that excellent suggestion. I will have another swig of beer. But yeah. All right. So yeah. 2. Hunger and rational motivation and donuts. It is natural, as we have said, to think that hunger motivates us to eat in virtue of the way it feels. What? Hunger motivates us to eat in virtue of the way it feels. Hunger, how hunger feels is how it is our motivation to eat. It's just a weird sense. Like, I'm trying to figure this out, but like maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. We will later present an account on which the motivating character of hunger is indeed inseparable from its phenomenal character. This claim might, to some, appear too strong. There are, after all, many motivational states of which this is not the case, such as one's desire to cross the road when on the way to the station, or a parent's long-term standing desire for their children's success. We might conclude with Anscombe that while desire can, in everyday language, be used for something we feel, the prick of desire, this sense of the word is not any interest in a study of action and intention. We might, if moved by this line of thought, prefer a more parsimonious approach to how hunger motivates, on which the felt dimension of hunger, whilst being in itself motivationally inert, gives the hungry person a reason to eat, a reason on the basis of which they are motivated to eat. The hungry agent's motivation to eat on this account is simply an exercise of practical intellect, an instance of our general capacity to be moved to act by reasons. Assuming this form of motivation is sufficiently well understood, we need only explain how hunger gives us a reason to eat. A natural account suggests itself. The feeling of hunger gives one a reason to eat because being hungry involves unpleasant sensations that, as such, we have reason to alleviate. We are thus motivated to eat when hungry because we know that such unpleasant sensations can be alleviated or removed by means of eating. This seems to be in line with how Scanlon proposes to understand thirst. What does thirst involve? First, in this quote, what does thirst involve? First, there is the unpleasant sensation of dryness in my mouth and throat. Also, there is the thought that a cold drink would relieve this sensation and, in general, feel good. I take this consideration that drinking would feel good to count in favor of drinking. I think this future is good, the pleasure to be obtained by drinking. That makes it worth my while to look for water. The present dryness in my throat gives me a reason to believe that a drink of water in the near future will give this particular pleasure. But the motivational work seems to be done by my taking this future pleasure to count in favor of drinking. This account fits with Scanlon's general attempt to understand motivation in terms of the agent's recognition of reasons for action. His attempt to fit the felt aspects of states like hunger and thirst within that framework is admirably neat, but it seems in a number of respects not quite right. The first and most glaring issue with this treatment of hunger is that it seems implausibly intellectualizing. Hunger on this sort of account essentially involves thoughts about pleasure and discomfort as such, and perhaps, in Scanlon's version, even thought about reasons as such. An obvious challenge to this sort of account is that hunger seems perfectly capable of motivating animals to seek food and eat, including many species of animals to which we would hesitate to attribute thoughts about pleasure and discomfort, let alone thoughts about reasons. Of course, we are concerned here to account for how hunger motivates us, human agents, and we do not mean to assume that humans and animal motivation are the same in every respect. Nonetheless, there is something puzzling about the idea that feeling hungry is sufficient to motivate non-human animals, but is motivationally inert in us unless coupled with the thought about reasons. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with them. If you have to be like, oh, my throat is dry, I must be thirsty then, it seems like you've got way too many steps there. It's like you also know yes, your throat is dry is not something you have to like logically reason that you're thirsty about. Usually it's the other way around. You're thirsty and you notice your throat is dry. So, of course it can happen the other way. I'm not saying it won't. Like a lot of times you'll realize oh, I didn't realize I was sick, but like I noticed my forehead is hot, like I have a fever. It's like I was feeling okay, but now I realize like something's wrong, like after the fact. So that can definitely happen, but it doesn't seem to happen, especially with thirst. You just realize you need water. You do not be like, oh, my mouth is so dry, and then oh man, I must be so thirsty. You already know you're thirsty when your mouth is dry due to thirst. So it seems like Scanlon's got the phenomenology backwards in that case. Okay, another problem with the account in question, more pertinent to the aims of this paper, is that it fails to capture a crucial aspect of the phenomenology of being hungry. The account suggests that being hungry motivates us to eat because we know that by means of eating we can relieve ourselves of the unpleasant sensations. We recognize these sensations knowing that eating will bring them to an end, and so we eat. This makes the hungry agent's motivation to eat look implausibly instrumental. We eat as a means to alleviating unpleasant sensations. Scanlon might here point out that his account appeals not only to the alleviation of unpleasant sensations, but also to future pleasures. And he might argue with Wilson that to say that something one does for pleasure is something one does as a means to enjoyment. The aims of this paper. Let me get back to you in like a half sec. Let me finish this paragraph up. We'll run up to the top again. But like basically, I think they're trying to understand how hunger is, what kind of thing hunger actually is. That's kind of part of it. This is a part of a collected issue that's all talking about the philosophy of hunger. All right, let me finish up this paragraph and we'll go back to the beginning and get you a quick recap. So let's see. A means to enjoyment is a purely verbal maneuver. Doing something because you like it or enjoy it is importantly different from doing something as a means to a further end. However, the pleasure in question in the Scanlonian model seems to be, primarily, the pleasure of relief from present discomfort. This is a distinct pleasure from that of intrinsic enjoyment of an activity. Eating gives us pleasure in Scanlon's account, not only in itself but through its effects. The problem with this is that the pleasure of relief is extrinsic to and thus in principle separable from the activity of eating. And so what are they trying to do here is a good question. They're trying to give an account of hunger and how hunger requires accounting for its experiential dimension and the connection between the hungry agent's experience and her food-seeking and consuming behavior. Drink water. Yeah, so for vipers, basically the account of how hunger motivates and has an experiential part of its motivation for us. So how do you experience hunger and how is that experience motivating for us? And then how does that experience make us seek out food? And that's kind of why I wanted to read this one, because I think it's interesting that food makes you like seek certain things out, but like how does it make you seek things out in the world? So I think that's interesting. I mean, it's one thing like you see, like you might think we might have like an innate sense of like what is sexy and you might seek that out. But like do we have an innate sense of what beer is? Like why would we have an innate sense of beer? Like we don't. And so how do we seek it out? I don't know, but like that's the question here. What is going on? Hunger makes you seek out not dying. Well, in part, but like you have to breathe too, and like lots of other stuff. So it's like that's one piece of it. And how does hunger make you seek out like foods you like as opposed to foods you like less, foods you like more? So yeah, like this is why I think it's interesting, because it's not just the not being like in pain from like being super hungry, which is painful. Okay, to see this point, and the point was that the pleasure of hunger is somehow separable from its experience. Or the pleasure of eating is separable from like the activity of eating, which is weird. You'd want the activity of eating to not be separable from its pleasure. So, to see this point, consider that the account makes the hungry agent's motivation to eat structurally akin to the desire you might have when suffering a headache to take a painkiller. In that situation, you experience discomfort and you know you can take steps to relieve it. If the painkiller works well and quickly enough, you may well characterize your relief as a pleasure. Crucially, though, specific action you take to attain such pleasure is merely incidental. If you could achieve the same relief by other means, then you would, all else being equal, be indifferent between those means and the pill. Now, being hungry does not sometimes motivate us to eat in this kind of way, that is, in virtue of an extrinsic connection to rational motivation. We sometimes notice that we are experiencing unpleasant or otherwise undesirable symptoms of hunger, such as pangs, fatigue, like lightheadedness, or getting hangry, and decide that we should eat to alleviate these symptoms. Like, that's funny that hangry has become an actual word now. People like the word hangry. If anyone doesn't know, there was I don't know, I saw it in a TV ad, but it's basically getting angry because you're hungry. So you're being grumpy because you need food. We might, being sophisticated as we are, learn that other methods, appetite suppressant drugs perhaps, are available for removing or reducing these symptoms when we find them inconvenient. And we may, particularly if we are preoccupied with something else and not interested in eating, prefer such means to eating. Yeah, Snickers. Exactly, Dune. Exactly, Dune. And welcome in, Dune. We're reading a paper about the philosophy of hunger. If you haven't been here, but yes. Snickers serves hangriness. Cases of this kind are clearly atypical, however, and it is striking that Scanlon's account fits them especially well. There is a difference between, on the one hand, noticing undesirable symptoms of hunger and being rationally motivated to alleviate them, and on the other, simply feeling hungry. Hunger bears an internal relation to food seeking and eating that Scanlon's picture fails to capture. Hunger in its nature directs us, compels us, specifically to seek food and eat, and not just to seek to rid ourselves of unpleasant sensations by whatever means available. Another aspect of that seems missing from Scanlon's model is hunger's urgency. Maybe the feeling in your stomach when you're hungry doesn't feel great, but except in extreme cases it is far from the level of an intense pain. Yet very often when hungry we simply cannot stop thinking about food and eating, so that we may find it very difficult or even impossible to do anything else requiring attention until we have eaten. Feeling hungry seems to constrain our attention in a way that simply being subject to an unpleasant sensation does not, and this seems to impart our motivation to eat its distinctive felt urgency. To be fair to Scanlon, I'm losing it, people. To be fair to Scanlon, he does acknowledge that something might be missing from his picture. He voices this worry, again discussing thirst, as follows. It may seem that in addition to the dryness in my throat, the future pleasure brought about by drinking, and my judgment that this pleasure is desirable, there is the fact that I feel an urge to drink. This, it might be said, is what my desire consists in. An urge, whatever exactly that is, might be just the kind of thing that has the features we are looking for. A kind of felt urgency, an internal relation to a specific course of action. Scanlon, however, is not impressed by the suggested appeal to urges, as the idea of a mere urge to act does not fit very well with what we ordinarily mean by desire. The desire to drink, he insists, is not merely a matter of feeling impelled to do so, it also involves seeing drinking as desirable. We do not disagree with Scanlon on this point, although we would question his appeal to thought about reasons in characterizing the seeing as desirable that's involved. Relatedly, we want to challenge the apparent assumption that mere urges, if they do not amount to what we ordinarily mean by desire, are of little to no interest in thinking about motivation. What our discussion of hunger to this point seems to suggest is precisely that felt urges may be central to how hunger ordinarily motivates. Urges such as those involved in thirst, hunger, fatigue, sexual arousal, and various physical cravings, such as the cravings of addiction, play a real and important motivational role that many authors interested in motivation by reasons have, we think, been too eager to dismiss. And I think this is a good point right here, because I was wondering if addiction would get brought up. And I had a friend in grad school a million billion years ago that was like, what do you people see in Trainspotting, the movie? And I was trying to explain, because she had never smoked weed. I had smoked weed when I was younger. Um, like, why do you, like, I mean, I'm not even going to compare weed to heroin, but like, what's the point? And I said, you're missing the first part of the movie where these bums, like those bums, were so motivated to go get their drugs. I said, there's a great focusing of energy when you're like addicted to a drug, that you just like, that's all you want to do, and it solves all the problems in your life because you only have one problem: how to get more heroin, for the people in the movie. So you've lost friends for showing that movie. Wow. Oh, the baby on the ceiling is a little freaky. Yeah, Vipers. I mean, some of this is like, man, I really need to eat now. Um, but to be fair, like, this is why they're Vipers. What you said is exactly right, but this is why they're harping on Scanlon right here, to show that this motivation is not actually well captured in the literature. That people have not actually appreciated all the things that are going into like the sort of thing when you like, I need to eat at 3 a.m. So, and that's why I like this. They brought up addiction, and they also talked about thirst, hunger, fatigue, sexual arousal, and and sexual arousal. So, and then the various physical cravings like addiction. So this is why I brought up sexual arousal before too, because like when you're horny, you go look at things that like you think are sexy. How do you know what to like look out for when you are horny? How do you know what to look out for when you're hungry? These are things that are outside of you that you are trying to like direct your attention at. So how does that actually work? It seems like a complicated thing. So yeah. All right. So this is gonna take a while because this double column thing kills me, but I'm gonna get there. We're on page 4 of 10. Hunger is a felt urge or affective reaction. The problems with the above rationalistic and instrumental account of how hunger motivates suggest that we should take seriously the idea that feeling hunger, as opposed to merely noticing symptoms of hunger, already involves motivation. The feeling of hunger is inherently motivating. To understand hunger in this way, rather than as a mere sensation, is to understand it as what we will call an affective reaction. Before turning to our specific proposal, it will be helpful to introduce a number of widely accepted preliminary assumptions and some useful terminology. And this is what I mentioned before when I said, look, you don't realize, oh, my mouth is dry, I must be thirsty. You realize, look, I'm thirsty and my mouth is dry. Usually it's not it's sort of like counting off, oh, I have this, like my mouth is dry, I'm lightheaded, this and like something else, and then you realize you're thirsty. That's not how things go. Like, you have to you know you're thirsty, and then you also recognize those as the symptoms of thirst. Okay. Affective reactions, as we understand them, form a broad mental category including disparate phenomena, such as, for instance, reflexive pain reactions, sensory pleasure, pleasure in activity, hunger, fatigue, sexual arousal, and emotional reactions, such as felt or episodic joy, fear, anger, shame, admiration, and so on. All these disparate phenomena are classified together as affective because they involve changes in affect, that is, positive or negative hedonic feelings, and relatedly, felt states of attraction or aversion. They are affective reactions in that they are initiated by their specific elicitors or triggers independently of agential control. Reflexive pain reactions and sensory pleasure, for example, are initiated respectively by noxious and pleasurable stimulation. Thirst, hunger, fatigue, and physical cravings by various homeostatic disturbances. Emotional reactions by cognized concern relevant, that is, personally or biologically significant events, objects, or situations. We shall assume that affective reactions are intentional phenomena and relatedly complex episodes. As we will see later on in more detail, they involve both affective and the sensations or cognitions from which they inherit their directedness or intentionality. Following a widely accepted terminology, we shall refer to these sensations and cognitions as the bases of affective reactions. All right, so that was a lot of words right there, but basically, I don't think it matters. They're going to get to this later. So, Within the class of affective episodes based on sensations, we can further distinguish cases where the sensations are caused exogenously, that is, by external stimuli, or, as in the case of the affective reaction with which we are specifically concerned in this paper, namely hunger, endogenously. So the exo is outside, and the endo is inside. So where does the source of the stimuli come from? So it's either outside or inside. And hunger is an internal one. It's endogenous. We may thus distinguish three kinds of affective reactions: sense-based reactions such as reflexive pain reactions and sensory pleasure, cognition-mediated affective reactions including emotional reactions such as fear, anger, shame, but also affective interest and affective desiring, and finally drive-based affective reactions like thirst, hunger, and other physical cravings. Yeah, Vipers, I think so. It's trying to explain what the passions are doing. So, and how we can talk about them better. So, there's we're here on Twitch. People play video games. People love their video games. Why do they love their video games? Why do you want to play a video game? What is that relief that's given? You could even throw this sort of thing on into the mix. Like, what is the sort of pleasure you're getting from a video game? Do you get emotional reactions out of that? Like, why? And so this is a sort of question you could also ask about this. Like, what is it about a video game that provides so much relief? What are you lacking that the video game is supplying? So these are sorts of, these can even be expanded into more areas. It is widely agreed that affective reactions involve motivation, they impel, and in some cases even compel, goal-directed cognition and behavior. What's the old boy about, late bloomer? The motivating dimension of affective reactions is indeed one of their essential properties, as we should expect given the plausible hypothesis that the primary biological function of such phenomena is to motivate us to deal or cope with the demands of affective eliciting situation. For example, the potential damage to some body part, homeostatic disturbance, or in the case of properly emotional reactions, concern relevant situations, for example, cognized threats to our physical and personal integrity in the case of fear. What void is the video game filling? Well, that would depend on the kind of game you're playing, I would think. But you definitely can play dating simulators. That's a section of gaming here on twitch.tv. You can play killing games, which may do many different functions where you get to shoot people. Strategy games, so there's whole sorts of things, and that's the question. This is really psychological, depending on what you are looking to do. But I mean, I just thought the dating sim one was a funny example. So, and I mean, the question of what are we getting at, and if you want to get even more up in the meta here, what is the interaction that you're having with me in the parasocial relationship of streamer to a viewer? And then you can talk about parasocial stuff and what are we lacking in maybe social contact or gaining in a parasocial relationship. So yeah, well, that is part of the goal here, is that you want to have a relaxing stream. So all right, I'm happy that you stopped by. Thank you for your time, and I'll hope to see you again soon. Sleep well. Nighty night. Bye bye. Okay, but anyway, we're gonna keep power through this. Affective reactions. And what's really funny about actually on this exact topic is that I watch a bunch of streams, and I'm not watching anything too unusual, I think, but I was thinking, what is it that I do? I'm reading papers to people outside, and these are not exciting papers, they're academic papers. So what am I providing? I'm funny enough, I'm probably in the group of ASMR streamers. I'm reading things that are not exciting. So it's should I go for the more ASMR stream than a more hype stream? I don't know, but that might actually be a who a kind of stream that is more akin to what I'm doing than I realized at first. So, I mean, I always thought of this as a reaction channel because I'm reacting to what I'm reading, but that's not that's like overall that might be true, but in the moment to moment, I might be closer to an ASMR streamer, which is a very funny thought for me at least. I don't know how you all feel about it, but I wonder about these things. Anyway, feel free to ask questions. Yeah, Vipers, I was like, I could get right up, I could get like right up to this and like talk like this. Like effective reactions owe their motivating dimension to their effective component. So I could do that for a while. I don't know if I would get any, if it would help, but I could. Effective components, effective reactions owe their motivating dimension to their effective component, the inherently rewarding or punishing hedonic feelings. You don't, Dune, you're probably right. Because the parasocial, it depends what you mean by parasocial. Like the parasocial paradigm is kind of limited, in the few times I've seen it like explicitly defined. I don't think we're the standard thought of parasocial keeps up with Twitch really, because like this is cutting edge basically. Anything you're watching on Twitch is, and I know you know, this is like cutting edge parasocial relationships, so it's not exactly gonna fit in. Well, yeah, I mean, if I get like 6,000 subs, I'll do a bikini stream. I currently have like one, so but yeah, I could put up a sub goal like 100 subs, bikini stream or whatever, or a hot tub stream. Go for it. Then we can do ASMR, read philosophy in a hot tub. Yeah, so, but I mean, going back to what Dune said, do substance-based streams not fit in with the rest of streaming for some reason? Or at least the parasocial stuff. I don't know. You think when the wall between content and personality is broken, it becomes parasocial? Yeah, but there's always going to be some of like my attitude coming through. There's always going to be some of my personality, my experiences, and so that is definitely part of the content. No matter what stream you're watching, you're getting their reactions to stuff. You're getting like some of their like anecdotes about their life. So it's definitely not just the content. Like if you wanted to have like the screen reader read this paper, then you could say, well, look, then there's nothing personal about it to me. But you're getting my stories and my reactions of this. So yeah. And that's why this is interesting. And oh yeah, and time makes a difference too. Like you're absolutely right. Like what kind of interaction, how you're understanding the stream, how much time you've put into it. So yeah. Okay. So at a certain level of description, these feelings are common to all affective reactions. All positive affective reactions involve a felt attraction, and all negative affective reactions are a felt aversion. However, each specific affective reaction motivates distinctive kinds of goal-directed behavior. This raises the question of how motivating power of affect obtains this goal-directedness. Scanlon is thus right to look for something that mediates between the somatosensory components of states such as thirst and hunger and the specific behavior they motivate. He is wrong, however, to think that this forces us to invoke thoughts about sensations that as such to play that role. Dune says, I guess for substance-based streams it takes considerably more time than a more personality-based stream. Yeah, that's true. One of my initial thoughts a long time ago as I was watching music reactions on YouTube. And so you're getting people like getting shocked or whatever, or like, oh my god, look, how did they do that? Like, and so it was a lot more reaction than what I'm doing here. And you know, like if you watch like a Shane McInnes stream, you're definitely getting a lot of Shane out of that, like the way he's presenting the material. But like, there's a lot of you're expecting to get content, and you're 100% right. You're expecting the content in some sense to be like objective when Shane is telling you the history. You want the objective history of what happened. You don't want his sort of like his personal take on it. You want to know kind of what happened. So that does make sense. Granted, this is philosophy, so you want to know what these people are saying and like what they're claiming. And I'm trying to explain that, but you're also going to get my flavor out of it because I'm better at certain things, I'm worse at certain things. So yeah, there's a question of how much personality to put into this. Like, I try not to insult the authors. I try not to. I'm trying to actually give a lot of principle of charity here. I'm trying to show what they mean in the most reasonable light. Like, personally, that doesn't always happen when like I'm reading something for myself. I am not being charitable. I want to kick the crap out of some people. And so it's like there's a difference between my streaming reading and then like when I read for myself. So there's something even in this area, like it's different. And I don't know if you guys care so much about like the inside baseball here of like how I'm thinking about it, but like this is all going into the stream. Okay. In order to capture the specifics of the way in which I'm going to update YouTube soon. I'm going to, I swear. It's just I had some more complicated uploads, and like I have to put more video editing time in, and video editing takes work, and so I'm just avoiding it. But I'm gonna update the YouTube reasonably soon. I mean, I'm only on, what am I on, 263. I think I have up into the 240s on YouTube already, and there's a bunch kind of ready to go, and yeah, so it'll get up there eventually, I think. Alright, so what are we doing? Okay. In order to capture the specifics of the ways in which being hungry motivates us to act, we suggest we need to understand the relation between the affect and the somatosensory components to which hunger owes its intentionality, namely the various sensations associated with the workings of the physiological mechanisms preserving homeostasis. And homeostasis basically means your like basic like normal, how you like your body is just the way it is, like the flat line for your body, just the nominal state. Being hungry involves various largely unpleasant sensations associated with physiological states of need or deficit. More specifically, when glucose levels fall, a cascade of hormonal alterations produces autonomic and visceromotor activation we experience as feeling hungry. Because of its dependency on such homeostatic mechanisms, hunger motivates cognition and behavior specifically aimed at reducing the associated deficiencies. But how, at the personal level of description, do the somatosensory and affective components of hunger interact to motivate such behavior? Not much theoretical effort has been put into articulating this relationship. The common tendency is to articulate it at the subpersonal level. This is perhaps in part because states like hunger in the philosophical literature are typically discussed for merely contrastive purposes, to distinguish them from other more cognitively sophisticated affective reactions like emotions or affective desiring. An example of this approach is Prince. Prince, like us, takes it that in order to understand the distinctive cognitive features of hunger, we need to distinguish hunger as an urge from emotional reactions understood as motives. The difference is, according to him, that motives provide reasons for action, while an urge impels or commands us to act. Prince recognizes that hunger involves both somatosensory and motivational components, but he views the relation between them as hardwired coupling relations that obtain the subpersonal neurological level. Hunger, quote, hunger actually commands us to eat. It is associated with cellular response and the lateral hypothalamus, which regulates eating behavior. Stimulation in this region causes us to eat, and damage causes us to stop eating. If a person simply had a negative valent representation of her undernourishment, say an unpleasant sensation of an empty gut, we would not necessarily say she was hungry. Hunger is a negatively valent representation of undernourishment coupled with an impulse to eat. If we wish to take seriously the thought that hunger motivates in virtue of how it feels, though, we cannot be satisfied with this account. The connection between feeling hungry and having an urge to eat is not, from the hungry agent's perspective, a mere coincidence. They are, so to say, experientially unified. To understand this, we suggest we need to understand how attention mediates between the somatosensory and the affective component of hunger. In order to do this, we shall exploit a comparison with a kind of affective reaction that has received a good deal more attention in philosophy, that is pain, or more precisely, reflexive pain reactions. Okay, so, let's just continue. Let's see where we get. I got some things to say, but probably can hold off till later. Our suggestion is that motivating power of an affective reaction is intimately connected with their power to consume attentional resources, and to do so by drawing our attention to the sensations or cognitions that constitute the basis of affective episodes. To illustrate this, we will first explain how attention plays this role in the case of reflexive pain reactions. First, what's up, Late Bloomer? So this is like proof that medical interventions can be needed for people who can separate the two. No, I don't think that's the point here. I think the point here is that the metaphysics are bad. If you can separate out the two, then I don't know if you can recombine them medically, but the idea is that if you're doing that, you're confused on how you think about the world. I think that's saying you've got your phenomenology twisted. If you think you can separate out that you are hungry and the feeling of hunger. Now, of course you can theoretically do it, but if you physically do it, I don't know if that makes sense. You'd be not having a physical disorder, but maybe you'd be confused about what it is to be hungry at that point. You don't have to rationally be eating food and then be I'm hungry afterward. That'd be stupid. You'd it's you'd be confused about what you're actually thinking at that point. And I don't think there's any medical intervention that can fix someone being confused. Yeah. Okay, but ask questions. That's a good question. That's a very interesting question. So if you got more questions like that, yeah. There's no pill I can give you, or someone who's to make you smarter, or to make you put things together the way I think they should be put together. It's just you can't. Nothing like that. Philosophy. There's no pill for philosophy I can give you. It's here, read this Plato. That's all I got. And not you specifically. I just in general. I said you, but I don't mean make you smarter. But yes, just make anyone smarter. It's here, everyone have this pill. You'll see the world the way I see it, and then we'll all be in agreement. No, not how things work. Okay, first note that subjects of such reactions feel impelled or compelled to attend to a certain located painful sensation in a way in which they wouldn't if the sensation weren't painful. A painful sensation is typically relatively difficult to ignore. It tends to be more or less obtrusive depending on its extent, quality, and intensity, and depending on how it compares with the other sensations and cognitive processes with which it has to compete at the time it occurs for our limited attentional resources. We might think that what compels attention is simply the inherent salience of the located somatic sensations. However, it seems that what draws our attention to these sensations is not their extent, quality, or intensity qua sensations, but rather their painfulness. Consideration of so-called dissociative so maybe this is what you're talking about, late bloomer. Consideration of so-called dissociation syndromes in the human experiences of pain, especially pain in symbolia, confirms this intuition. Conscious awareness of the located sensations doesn't, in the absence of any aversion, move the mind in any way, and is all too easily ignored. On the other hand, when one is in a state of pain because of some located painful sensation, one's attention is not occupied by one's being in pain as some global unlocated pain or suffering, as may be the case in exhaustion or emotional suffering, and one's experience is clearly different from that of other global unlocated unpleasant sensations, such as those generated by, for instance, certain tastes, sounds, or colors. To focus on one's being in pain is to focus on certain precise sensations as located in one's body and as having distinctive painful qualities, such as being pulsing, cutting, drilling, stabbing, or throbbing, as well as their extents and intensities. This distinction is illustrated by another dissociative syndrome. This syndrome is characterized by loss of pain sensation with preserved pain affect, and is thus the converse of pain in symbolia. Though the patient in some sense feels they are in pain, they are unable to localize exactly the site of the noxious stimulation, to register its temporal properties, to evaluate its intensity, and to quantify it in any way except that it is generally unpleasant. The distinctive contributions of the affective and somatosensory components of reflexive pain reactions thus seems to be this. While the former contributes the aversive character of pain, the latter provides information about its spatial and temporal character, its intensity and painful qualities. In light of this analysis, we may say that while the affective component of the reaction determines the persistence or continuation of our attentional engagement, the somatosensory component determines the direction of attention. This modification of the way in which our attention is deployed during affective reaction is, we suggest, what imparts urgency to the behaviors that affective reactions motivate. During affective reactions, it seems to the subjects that their capacity to engage in any activity requiring attentional resources is and will continue to be impaired until they have coped with the demands of the effect eliciting situation. For instance, in reflexive pain reactions, until they have protected the potentially damaged body part, not bloody part, but it might be bloody, but it's just a body part, or in thirst or hunger until they have drunk some water or eaten some food. In this sense, affective reactions are disturbances or perturbations that disrupt, interrupt, or prevent other activities that would require attentional resources. Alright, I always want to point one thing out. I think it got said in some very big words like over here somewhere. But basically, what makes pain and hunger really sort of like motivate you now is that it takes away any other sort of attention that you can give off. So like you can't change your attention away from it. So I've heard before it says like torture is like an active thing. You can't sort of like zen out. It focuses your attention on it. And that's where the urgency is, because it blocks off the ability to engage with anything else. So that's what it says. So to subject the capacity to, so here we go, right? This is it. Their capacity to engage in any activity requiring attentional resources is and will continue to be impaired. That's what it is. It's impairing your ability to shift your attention away. So that's an interesting claim. Like, how does these sort of things do that? So, in both pain and hunger, there is an aversion towards some bodily condition, but in virtue of the internal relation between such bodily condition and our suffering or discomfort as mediated by attention, we are not motivated to make our suffering or discomfort cease by any means available, but rather in certain specific manners. This point is nicely articulated in Soterio's discussion of the relationship between one's having painful located sensations and one's being in pain or suffering. The kind of located sensation event that is occurring feels to the subject to be one that couldn't occur without her being aware of it, without her being in pain, without that part of her body hurting. So it feels to the subject as though it is not possible to stop the unpleasant effect of the occurrence of the located sensation event without stopping the occurrence of that located sensation event. Therefore, the subject won't simply be inclined to avoid the unpleasant effects of the occurrence of the sensation event. The subject's natural inclination will be to protect herself from whatever it is that is causing the occurrence of the located sensation event, and this will often require protecting the body part where she feels the sensation event to occur. Yeah, so you are forced to attend to that specific location due to the pain. This internal relation between the somatosensory and the affective component explains why during pain we feel an urge to protect the body part where the painful sensations are localized. Analogously, it may explain, we suggest, why in hunger we feel urge to eat, that is, to remedy the situation that is causing the occurrence of the unpleasant sensations of hunger, and not an urge to seek to rid ourselves of such unpleasant sensations by any means available. This view, unlike a view on which thoughts about sensations mediate between sensations and the motivated behavior, can account for the variable strength of our motivation. The more intensely we are affected, the more we suffer, the more we feel that our attentional engagement with the effective eliciting situation gets close to non-optional or compelled. This explains why the behavior motivated by intense pain or hunger often takes precedence over the other courses of action, even when we have strong reason to pursue other goals such as winning the match or losing weight. When the effective reaction is strong enough, we cannot attend to the thought and the action required to pursue those goals until the effect eliciting situation has been addressed. Alright, so a lot of words to say, look, when you're hungry, you have to deal with the hunger. You're not dealing with the thought that you're hungry, because if you were just dealing with the thought, then you could deal with other thoughts. But when you're hungry, it cuts off the ability to think about other thoughts. And so you only can deal with that situation. So, but like that does seem to make sense. When you need food, you need it now. And you're like, I need it now and I don't care about other things. Especially thirst. When you're thirsty, oh boy, it gets bad. I've definitely got close to like heat. One of the like just heat exhaustion. No, heat stroke is whatever the less bad one was. Like I've definitely done that, and it's no fun. You're just like, I need water now. Okay, the desire for food. This account of hunger as an urge is enough, we think, to explain how hunger can move us to eat in virtue of how it feels, without being subject to the problems faced by an account on Scanlon's model. However, we also think there is more to be said, as indeed Scanlon also recognizes what the concept of an urge doesn't capture is the positive attraction we feel towards eating, the anticipated pleasure of satisfying our hunger. If we are interested not just in hunger as a state of deprivation, but in the motivational structure that is ordinarily at play in the mind of the hungry agent, and also in the character of the overall experience of hunger, feeling hungry as opposed to just feeling hungry as opposed to just feeling hunger, we need to account for the whole role of this felt attraction. It is widely acknowledged that the motivation to seek food and eat may have diverse causes, including not only homeostatic disturbances but also external stimuli, such as the taste, smell, or sight of food, as well as food-related thinking and imagining. In the medical sciences, it is common to distinguish the homeostatic causes from what we may call situational or cognitive causes, particularly if we accord the basis of affective reactions the kind of role is particularly if we accord the basis of affective reactions the kind of role envisaged in our account of hunger as an urge. This distinction naturally leads to the view that there exist two distinct species of desire for food, which differ not only in their causes but in how they motivate. The former, homeostatic kind, motivates in virtue of negative hedonic feelings or aversion. The latter, situational or cognitive kind, does so in virtue of positive hedonic feelings or the attraction to the anticipated pleasure of feeding. Yeah, so you got one where you're really hungry and you need to eat now, it doesn't really matter what. And then the second one is like, oh man, that looks really tasty, I want to eat it. And you might not have even been hungry before, but now that you see it, you're hungry. It's like, give me that slice of pie. However, although homeostatic and situational cognitive cues may cause our being motivated to eat independently from one another, it is also widely acknowledged that they typically occur and interact in many ways to causally sustain our motivation to eat. The tendency to discuss states like hunger for contrastive purposes, explaining how as mere urges they differ from desires and emotions, has led to a neglect of the interplay between these kinds of effects. Tompkins, one of the founders of affective sciences, famously warned against this sort of compartmentalization within the realm of affective motivation, arguing that it obscures the fact that affective reactions such as pain, hunger, and sexual arousal borrow much of their power to motivate from the emotional reactions they tend to recruit. The panic of one who experiences the suffocation of interruption of his vital air supply has nothing to do with the anoxic drive signal per se. A human being could be, and often is, terrified about anything under the sun. It is a short step to see that the excitement has nothing per se to do with sexuality or with hunger, and that the apparent urgency of the drive system was borrowed from its co-assembly with appropriate effects, emotional reactions, as necessary amplifiers. This is a good point. It's like, if you're really hungry, it doesn't actually matter that you're hungry, but like there's a whole subsystem that must be kicking in to make you feel like this motivated to do something. All right, and author says, to appreciate Tompkins' point, it might be useful again to consider pain. Although pain is inherently motivating, emotional reactions such as fear and anxiety often contribute to the way that pain motivates. This might not be apparent if we consider only cases in which avoidant behavior doesn't outlast its cause, as when we immediately withdraw our hand from a hot stove. Consider, however, cases in which the painful sensation continues after the noxious stimulus is removed. In such cases, we feel motivated to protect the body part where the painful sensation is localized, say by preventing impact against another object. Now, we might think that this avoidant behavior is motivated simply by the awareness of the painful sensation plus the belief that it would be exacerbated by impact. However, besides being rather implausibly intellectualistic, this view, we feel, fails to fully accommodate the phenomenology of pain-related avoidance and protection. Pain is scary. When in pain, we tend to become anxious about the possibility of exacerbating the painful sensation, and our fear and anxiety themselves directly motivate careful avoidant and protective behavior with no need for mediating cognitions. Moreover, fear and anxiety enhance our attention to the painful sensation. This idea fits well with empirical research showing that excessive attention to painful sensation is fed by fear and anxiety, and relatedly, that fear and anxiety crucially contribute to the experience of pain and play a role in its becoming chronic. This suggests that pain on the one hand and fear and anxiety on the other can be mutually reinforcing. And that makes some sense. Something similar is going on, we suggest, in the case of hunger, except whereas pain typically recruits negative or aversive emotions, such as fear and anxiety, hunger typically recruits positive emotions, namely affective interest and excitement about food, and the felt attraction we call appetite. The emotional reactions recruited by pain contribute to the biological function of pain by enhancing the agent's aversion to the noxious stimulus. In recruiting positive effect, hunger adds to the agent's existing felt aversion to her present state of need a positive attraction to something that will meet that need, so that she is simultaneously pushed and pulled in the same direction by the urge to eat and the desire for some specific food, respectively. When we are hungry, normally we feel not only aversion to our present state of deprivation, but an interest in and attraction to food, to eating. Food is intrinsically appealing. This attraction, like hunger, involves a distinctive modulation of attention. In hunger, our attention is engaged by the sense of deficit. In attraction by food-related cognition, this typically involves some sense of what kind of food we fancy and mental activities such as fantasizing about food and thoughts about how to get it, namely cookies. Everyone thinking about cookies. That's what I'm thinking about. Such thoughts and fantasies are often momentarily rewarding. We think forward to the pleasures of eating and look forward to them with pleasure, not just with pain at our present state of deprivation. Okay, there's a lot of words that basically build up the idea that the psychology really matters here. We like our pleasant thoughts, and the pleasant thoughts associated with food becomes part of our appetite, that we build up our appetite by thinking about the pleasant thoughts, and that builds on our hunger, and that creates a positive hunger. And then, of course, the negative hunger is the other one that we were talking about before, when you just need food because your body needs food, your body needs energy or whatever. Okay. As with pain, the drive-based affective reaction and the, in this case, positive emotional reactions are mutually reinforcing. They fuel one another. Hunger, by enhancing our sensitivity to food-related stimulation, the taste, the sight, the smell of food, fuels our interest, excitement, and desire for food. At the same time, these emotional reactions, in the absence of food, and once their momentary reward has waned, tend to sharpen our sense of deficit. Viper says, I agree with a lot of word statement. This paper is like state the obvious in at least 5,000 words. You know, sometimes there are a word count on these things. This was for a special issue, so maybe they had to build it up. Also, philosophy, unfortunately, this is just how it is. You have to be very careful with what you say, and that takes more time. So, that's one of the deficits of reading philosophy, is you have to slog through a lot of it. This completes our account of how hunger motivates. You see, you don't actually need this whole sentence right here, like, to tell people that you're done with this area. But, like, they put it in anyway. This is a, one of these, like, sign markers. If you're, like, in writing, you put these sign markers so people know what's going on in the paper. But, like, it's an extra sentence. It's unnecessary. Is it really taking up a lot of space? No, but this is how it is. This account recognizes and clearly articulates hunger's distinctive aversive character as a drive-based effective reaction, while also accommodating the hedonic ambiguity of the hungry agent's state of mind through an analysis of the complex dynamic interplay between the hunger itself and positively valenced, cognitively sophisticated affective reactions. In doing so, we hope to have shown that while it may be important to distinguish different kinds of effect, this shouldn't lead us to treat them in complete isolation from one another. If our aim is to understand the affective and motivational structure of the minds of human agents, the most relevant unit of an analysis in view of such aim may sometimes be certain dynamic complexes of different kinds of affect that outstrip common taxonomical boundaries. And so, yeah, that whole paragraph just restated what they just said over here. In the final section, we will conclude by briefly illustrating how our account might further be put to work to capture the variable and complex hedonics of satisfaction, frustration, and in the experience of the hungry agent. Yeah. All right, so we're getting there. I need stretch, though, because I'm in pain. It's very painful. Not really. This is one funny thing. I saw a streamer mention this recently too, and it's 100% true. When you're streaming, you are almost always facing perfectly forward ahead. Like, you might turn like a little this, like I have a second monitor right here, but like you actually get like whiplash almost from not moving because your neck is like so stiff this way. So it's like you get these unique injuries from sitting like this. The pleasures and pains of hunger. Even though the bodily sensation of hunger may be much the same, beer. Even though the bodily sensations of hunger may be much the same, being hungry feels different to the agent who expects their urge to be satisfied and to the agent who lacks this expectation or who expects it to remain unsatisfied. Also, for the agent who expects food, there's a big difference depending on whether they expect mere satisfaction of hunger or satisfaction of appetite. The way in which hunger recruits and interacts with emotion underpins the distinctive pleasures of satisfaction and the anticipation of satisfaction, in contrast with mere relief and alleviation of discomfort. And the character of hunger as a felt need explains why it can, when unmet, become a kind of suffering more severe that caused by the frustration of ordinary desire more suffering than that caused by frustration of ordinary desiring. In this final section, we offer a brief overview of these different scenarios. Okay. The fulfilling of one's urge, the meeting of one's felt need for food, is called satiation. This satiation is felt as the alleviation of a state of deprivation and hence is a kind of relief. One can feel this pleasure in as much as it is a pleasure without enjoying what one eats in order to meet one's felt need. The desire for a particular kind of food, on the other hand, usually results, when fulfilled, in pleasure in the food itself, in eating with pleasure. Such pleasure is not just relief or satiation, but is the pleasure of positive affective engagement characterizing states such as delight, interest, and excitement. After eating, we may either feel a lingering pleasure or possibly a persistent desire for more. Although you may enjoy your first piece of cake a great deal, it might not be enough to satisfy you. This satisfaction of one's desire for food is not wholly separate from the satiation of one's hunger, but neither do they always perfectly coincide. Hence, we often keep eating even after we are full. While the pleasures of eating themselves go beyond the mere relief satiation, nonetheless, one of the ways in which hunger interacts with the desire for food, a way familiar to any gourmand, is that hunger tends to enhance the pleasure of eating. Viper says, in an age of neuroscience and biochemistry, approaching this topic through philosophy feels like searching for water with dowsing, the dowsing rods, yeah. You know, you're not wrong, but in some sense, you're not right either. Because the neuroscience is never going to tell you why I'm thinking of cheesecake right now, as opposed to anything else. Like, I'm thinking about cheesecake. And so, why am I thinking specifically about cheesecake? And that's like all the psychology. That's my personal history. That's a lot of other stuff. I think where these people really have a good point is in this positive side of things, where why are you searching out the things you're searching out? Well, you're not going to find the answer to that in the neuroscience or the biochemistry. You're going to find that in the history of the people and things like that. And so you're not actually in the psychology of the person. And so that's kind of where I think these people have the best point. But we can talk about it in a sec when we finish this up. All right, so let me just reread this. While the pleasures of eating themselves go beyond the mere relief of satiation, nonetheless, one of the ways in which hunger interacts with the desire for food, a way familiar to any gourmand, is that the hunger tends to enhance the pleasure of eating. It may be nice to eat a delicious treat even when you aren't particularly hungry, but it is typically better when you are. It is, therefore, not uncommon to conceive a desire for some foodstuff and wait until one has an appetite in order to enjoy it better, perhaps in the meantime looking forward to the future pleasure. The pleasures and pains of hunger and appetite can also come apart in the negative dimension, and the frustration of hunger and the frustration of the desire for food each have a different affective character. It is not uncommon to have one's hunger satiated by food that one does not find particularly appealing. If you find yourself in such a situation, having been looking forward to something more enjoyable, you might feel satiated but also disappointed. This ambivalent affective situation reflecting the fact that while your need was met, your desire was not. Yeah, on this point, I just want to say, sometimes when I don't know what to eat for dinner, like I know I have to eat, like I'm going to get hungry eventually, I just wait till I'm super hungry and then all of a sudden different foods appeal to me. So it's like, I'm not happy about that, but like I have to eat something, but like I don't have anything like particularly good. So I just wait, and eventually I get so hungry that I eat something, then I don't have to eat anymore. And just sort of like, that's just getting it done. That's not really enjoying the food. Yeah. I'm with you, question mark. Similarly, although perhaps less commonly, your desire for food might be almost wholly satisfied by, say, an cuisine tasting menu, even though you may leave the restaurant still feeling a little peckish. More seriously and more darkly, hunger is a felt urge based in a real physiological need, which when unmet becomes more and more intense. Viper says, no need to explain it to me. I have an eating disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Wow, I don't know what that is, but I'm sorry to hear that you have an eating disorder. Yeah. Avoidant restrictive. I mean, if you want to tell more about it, feel free. If you don't, that's cool too. But it's just, yeah. I don't know much about eating disorders, to tell you the truth. Like, I know basically nothing. I just, like, know anorexia and bulimia just because they're the biggest names, I guess. Or at least that's what I've heard. All right, let me just finish this last paragraph. The frustration of hunger is therefore unlike that of a simple attraction. When a felt attraction goes unsatisfied, the frustration can be felt as a kind of pain, a pain which, when there is still some prospect of satisfaction, further motivates the activity of seeking satisfaction. Nonetheless, it is generally an option to simply give up and accept defeat, leaving one with a more or less momentary disappointment. By contrast, when the frustrated motivation is dependent on a real need, as hunger is, giving up is not an option. The motivation and the associated negative effect will tend to intensify. If the agent can see no way towards meeting the need, their experience will be one not of mere disappointment, but, if the need is profound enough, despair and desperation. Okay, so I like this paper. It's basically breaking up hunger into two bits. You've got the part that's like just satiating you, that's making you like fill that your homeostatic need, that like to get the nutrients in your body, plus the second, the appetite, which is the positive, like you like to eat. It is associated with like positive psychological features. Viper says basically it's a picky eater to the extreme. I have safety foods that I never deviate from. Oh, I see. Okay, so you really stick to certain foods. I got you. Yeah, and then if like you don't have your good foods with you, then you might not eat. Yeah, it doesn't sound fun. But yeah, so this paper is basically trying to say, look, you can't overly intellectualize eating. It's not like you have an idea that you get hungry and that idea gives you a reason. You have to have direct motivation from it, and that's what is going on here. And the direct motivation takes two forms. The one form is you need to satisfy your biological needs. That's the homeostatic one, where you can satiate your hunger. And the second one is the psychological appetite, where you can build up to it. And yeah, so that's an interesting thing, that we've broken hunger into two different phenomena that are interacting at any given point. Does this make sense? I don't know. Like, it might be right. This is metaphysics, basically. It's yeah, it's basically saying, look, there's multiple things that are at play, and then they explain how hey, evolve yourself. How are you? We are reading this paper on, it's called The Mind of the Hungry Agent, Hunger, Affect, and Appetite. Basically, probably going to finish up soon. But, yeah, we're just discussing, like, what is it to be hungry, and, like, how does that motivate us to eat? So, yeah. If you have any questions on it, we just read a paper on this. Apparently, there was a whole special issue of Topoi dedicated to the philosophy of hunger. What's it mean to be hungry? So what I found most interesting in this is this bit right here, is that basically it can control your attention, and they claim that your attention is controlled by preventing you from deviating your attention from anything other than your hunger. Like when you are focused on pain, you lose everything else. And so they're saying hunger is the same way. You lose anything else in your head, like your ability to focus on anything else except for your hunger. Now, of course, no one can explain how this happens in your mind or in the psychology. That's massively complicated. How could you being hungry change how you're looking at the world? Because Evolve Yourself says, because of survival value over the course of evolutionary time, right? Well, I mean, that'd be an explanation of how it came about, but not why that's how it came about, but not why it happens, like, or how it happens right now. It's not how, that'd be a why. And let me get you Evolve Yourself is also a streamer and does some philosophy and meditation, and it's a good stream, so everyone should check out Evolve Yourself. Viper says, is it even fair to compare these two forms of hunger from a biochemical perspective? One causes good brain juice, the other bad brain juice. I think it's fair to you have to talk about them at the same time, because they're both at play, because they're going to be both at play most of the time. Most of the time you're not in like a survival situation where you just have to eat, and so you're going to have a positive expectation of looking forward to eating, and you should probably And that's going to be mixed up with the positive feedback, as they were saying, that you get from the satisfaction of becoming satiated and satisfying your hunger. So when you satisfy your hunger, you're going to get positive psychological feedback, and then that psychological feedback will also affect how you feel about it when you're hungry. So I think you can say there are two very different things going on here, but they're going to be at play at the same time. So yeah, you can't take away our biophysical reaction from our psychological reaction. I mean, at least not in this one case. So yeah. And if someone else that streams here, let me know. Question mark. I don't think you stream. Do you stream? And Vipers, are you streaming? I'd give you a shout out if you want. Just let me know. But yeah. So there's a question. Is like, how do you separate this stuff out? I wouldn't want to separate these things out because the pleasure you're gonna get, even from food you don't like when you are very hungry, is going to have a lot of psychological power for you. Like if you've ever been dehydrated and you got water, you're like, this is the greatest water in the world. You're like, this is the greatest water I've ever drank in my life. Like, it's very weird. There's a quote from, what was it? Guy with the blades coming out of his hands. Wolverine and Hugh Jackman. And you know, when you're in one of these movies like Hugh Jackman was, he was completely like ripped and strong, but to look that way for the scenes when he didn't have a shirt on, he has to like massively dehydrate himself to the point he said he could smell water like across the room, like 2 rooms away. If someone opened like a bottle of water, he could smell water from like from great distances. Like he could hear the bottle opening, he could smell water. Like all of his focus all of his attention was basically directed at the water. And so this is one of these funny things. It's like, how does like all of that get wrapped up? And then you want to like say, well, you've got 2 different things going on. This is what the cleverness of this article is, to basically break it down into bite-sized pieces to get all of that sort of working together. The fact that they even did that is very impressive in terms of the article here, to separate it out in a clever way that it does make sense. And so it's a credit to these authors, I would say, to have a metaphysics, or basically a metaphysics of organizing the multiple things that they were saying was going on here in a consumable way. So that's where all the work was in this paper, is to organize the accounts. Because I think everyone can understand the homeostasis you need to eat physically. But then the psychological part that they were able to tack on about the appetite is, yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a consumable. This is a product. So, question mark says, I used to, but I had another project podcast, but recently retired, so I'll get back into it. I used to cover procreation, ethics, philosophy of death, etc. David Bantar, Travis Timmerman, the emo side of philosophy. Oh, nice. Well, you let me know. Okay. What? Cool. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't streamed for a good 6 months due to, issues. And so, I'm trying to get back now. Yeah, not Mondays. Wednesdays and Sundays I'm trying to stream. And so, yeah. Viper says, although I admit that my personal experience may play into my frustration with how over-explained it is. Yeah, well, that's one of the issues. That's actually a very good point in, like, a general sense. They're trying to explain something that is very close to everybody. Everybody here knows what it is to be hungry. Everyone here knows what it is to be in pain. And so you're trying to explain something that everyone already knows a lot about. And so that's hard. And I always, like, when I was younger, I had a problem. I was like, what the fuck are these people talking about? They're trying to state this stuff in a way that is not only so that they can explain it and you can explain it, but that anyone who actually hasn't thought about this at all can can also get into it. And so it's like you're not always the general audience here. So yeah, 5 months stuff, personal stuff, or things to look at now. Yeah, no, it's been rough times all around for various reasons. So it's it's what happens, and it's fine. It's called life. So yeah, and that's exactly it. It's also who's the intended audience. This intended audience is professional philosophers, which, they're looking for a bit more verbosity, you could say. So, all right, you guys have any more questions? Anybody, you folks out there in the viewing audience, or else I'm gonna get out of here. It just clicked over to the next day here on the East Coast of the United States, and I should probably get to bed in some reasonable time. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Vipers, evolve yourself, ? Late bloomer, Aristotle. If I missed anyone, sorry. It's probably gonna be sometime between. I'm gonna start streaming sometime, usually between 8 and 10. Why was I thinking about cheesecake? Well, it's like if I want. Yeah, I think. Well, let me finish ? I think between 8 and 10 will be like my normal start times, and I'll go for an hour or two. Thank you for coming. Evolve yourself. Why was I thinking about cheesecake? I haven't had good cheesecake in a while. Object of desire. This is one of my favorite cakes. I like tiramisu, cheesecake, key lime pie, and these are things I haven't had in a while because I'd usually get them when I was going out to restaurants. And frankly, I haven't been going out to that many restaurants in the last 2 years. So that's why I want that. So that's it. Yeah. And I wonder, just like being me, and like, did they write this entire paper just so that they could use the word hangry in a philosophy paper?